Hi guys, I've made a huge discovery about this guy, and so in this video, this is going to be my explanation of the Second Dream story, but I've only played the game up to the Second Dream. So it's going to contain spoilers for Second Dream and other things that I'm going to theorize about, but also, as you'll be able to see in the corner over there, chat is going to be allowed to talk about spoilers throughout this, so that if you've seen all of this stuff already, you can see their reactions, and I think it just might make it more entertaining. But for now, let's dive into the details. I've taken 30 odd hours of notes for this video. I've taken so many damn notes. We've got scribblings and crazy stuff all over the place. I mean, there's some really wild stuff in here, so I'm going to use those to my advantage as we go through the story. So I'll be pulling ideas from Second Dream itself, obviously, but also the quest before, which is called Natah, and a little bit of knowledge that I've picked up from exploring the wider world of Warframe in-game. But things I have not done include reading the Warframe wiki. I haven't read that at all. I've just pulled some transcripts from it for some of these slides. I've also not asked chat to explain the story at any time I don't want it explained to me. And the third thing I've not done is opened my eyes or ears at TennoCon. I went to TennoCon, I vlogged TennoCon, but I had a blindfold on the entire time. So I didn't get any spoilers that will affect this video, which is great news. So this is the point where chat is going to start filling with spoilers. I'm going to stop looking at the chat because we are at the theory setup, okay? I need to tell you something super specific that you're going to keep in the back of your mind, and then eventually we're going to get to my grand theory and conclusion of all of this stuff, and it's going to be magical. We need to start with REDMAN. Who is REDMAN? Well, you guys might know this character as Stalker, because that's what the game transcripts, for example, refer to him as. There's a few other mentions of Shadow and things like that. I call him REDMAN because that was what I called him when I first saw him, and his name was a bunch of question marks in the game. But the question is, why is REDMAN so angry? He's such an angry fella at all times, and this is a little perplexing unless you really dig into the details. So I first met REDMAN really early in the game. I took down an assassination target, and he killed me over and over again. And then in Second Dream, you meet this fella called Alad, and Alad lets something slip which is related to REDMAN, and I think is very important. So this is a clip of that happening. We're going to watch it now. And Alad said, don't care.
Seems like he's made quite a powerful friend, hasn't he? I wonder what's under that scary, smoky exterior. A heart of gold, perhaps.
A heart of gold, perhaps. What kind of weird foreshadowing is that, eh? Indeed, Milo. What kind of weird foreshadowing is that exactly? Why did Alad say that? It's very strange, okay? So the quote is, "This stalker seems like he's made quite a powerful friend, hasn't he? I wonder what's under that scary, smoky exterior. A heart of gold, perhaps?" Keep that in the back of your mind, chat, because you might think it's just a throwaway line, and after all, there is all of this other stuff in Second Dream, so it could just be a one-off, but I think it's important. I think that you should internalize this for reasons I will illuminate later in the video, okay? He does indeed have a heart of gold. It's very important. When this theory came to me, I was so excited. I knew I had to make this video because I was like, oh my god, it's all coming together and this game is cinema. So, last few things that we need to cover before I get into some of my other theorization and explanation of Second Dream. When I first met this guy in Natah, I called him Treeman. Again, he didn't have a name at the time, so I just gave him a name. So he's Treeman for the rest of this video. Okay, you can call him, I think it's Hunhao if you want. He's Treeman for the purpose of this. These blue things down here are mermaids. Again, they were unnamed in the game, so I picked my own name. And this little tube fella in the corner, who you can't really see because it's covered by my camera, but I can show you guys like this, is Til Regor. Just so you know, those are some relevant characters. So, let's do a play-by-play of what happens in Natah and in Second Dream. And then we can use that to really get into our theories, of which I have several. Now, this looks very intimidating because it's massive, right? But luckily for you, rather than going beat by beat like this and trying to force all this information into your brain in one go, I've separated this out slide by slide, okay? So, the first thing that happens is, in the beginning of Natah, these mermaids are spotted on Uranus, and they're scanning old relics that are buried in Uranus. And so you're investigating what's going on with those mermaids, and the information comes to light that the Grineer, led by that tube guy I just showed you, have been trying to disturb the tomb of Treeman. So opening that tomb frees Treeman. Very scary stuff. And Lotus, we find out, came from Treeman's womb, and Lotus was meant to destroy the Tenno, but didn't. That's the sort of ending of Natah. It's all very crazy and revealing what's going on there, but you still kind of are a little confused by the end of that mission. Now, another thing you learn there is that instead of ending the Tenno, destroying the Tenno like she was meant to do, Lotus hid the Tenno in the Second Dream, and she says, now I'm the Lotus, baby, I'm the mummy in this situation, and Treeman feels betrayed by that. So then we go into Second Dream itself, and this is just a little snapshot of some of my notes, and in the cinematic intro for Second Dream, Treeman recruits REDMAN to destroy the hidden Tenno heart, aka the womb in the sky, and Treeman is going to talk to REDMAN in that cutscene via a fragment of himself, which is a sword. That's this thing here. And we then learn that Treeman is invading Lotus's mind. And so she sends you to the Grineer archives to find out what the Grineer know, because the Grineer, remember, are the faction associated with Till Regor, the tube guy who's been opening up the tomb. So they're hoping that the Grineer are going to have more information about what's happening here. And the archives contain a message. And the message is from this wonderful, wonderful man on your screen right now. None other than Alad, or Alad, as I like to call him. He leads you to a fragment of Treeman, which is behind my camera, but you can see it just there. And when you touch that fragment of Treeman, that exposes to Treeman where the womb in the sky is. Because basically, Treeman touches the Tenno, or the Tenno touches the Treeman, and that kind of lets them have a brain link for a moment, and he figures out the location of the womb in the sky because of that. Very negative stuff for our characters, our protagonists. So we find out that the womb is the reservoir, and it's hidden on the moon, and the moon is hidden in the void. And Treeman can't go to the void because it's poisonous to him for some reason we'll talk about later. And so the REDMAN goes there, and the Tenno follows to the moon, Lua. On Lua, you go through various weird routes, and you activate a nav console, and then you destroy these pendula, which then allow the moon to be pulled from the void and go back to its rightful place on Earth. An interesting side note that you might find fun and informative is that pendula, to me, sounds like the plural of pendulum. Like you'd have one pendulum or multiple pendula. But I also discovered pendula is a botanical term, and it's an adjective. So it's not a noun, right? It's an adjective to describe something which is weeping or hanging growth habits. And what are the pendula in the mission, right? These things in the center of this structure here, they're quite literally, as you can see on the right-hand side, hanging growth habits. So the word pendula kind of has some double meaning there, which I thought was really, really cool. And you'd have never realized unless I happened to Google for the botanical form of the word. Then, as we progress through the missions here, with the moon returned from the void, there's some weird stuff. We see this face, for example, or at least I found this face. Don't know what's going on there, we'll come back to that later. We also learn about Margulis and Bulls, which we'll talk about later on. Eventually, you get to this pod room in the shape of a lotus flower, and an operator drops out, and they touch the Tenno, and the REDMAN chooses, interestingly, not to kill the Tenno in this moment. Yeah, that's going to be very relevant later on. You see the pod pop out, but the Tenno is not smited for some reason. Then, Tenno returns to the orbiter, and Redman attacks in the orbiter and stabs the Tenno, but the Tenno breaks the sword, and so at first when they're about to break it, it sort of freezes Redman up, and then Redman pops and sort of disappears in a big burst of fire. Doesn't look like he dies there, but he does leave. And you then get this moment where Lotus comes in and carries the operator into this little bench, and they got their nails out, and then Lotus is like, yay, happy days, we discovered the operator is actually the Tenno themselves, just controlling them through this pod thing. You then also learn about the Tenno ways, which are a school that each of the Tenno follow, which kind of guide their actions on Earth. So, that was the little sort of beat by beat of all of this stuff that happens in Natah Second Dream. It feels like a lot, but there are some real big questions that stand out. What's Redman's deal? We started the video with that. But equally, what's the deal with Treeman and Lotus? Why are they so knowledgeable of one another and seemingly at odds if they're also family of some kind? Margulis and Balls. What's going on there? And there's a whole lot of other stuff as well. And we're going to cover all of this through the rest of the video. So let's start with Margulis and Balls, because this one's quite a good one to sort of separate from the rest of the pack, and we can then go back to the information we learned from it and thread it into some of the other discoveries that we're going to make, okay? I'm going to do my best here. Again, this looks like a lot. It looks like a lot, but luckily for you, I am armed with the ability to draw. So without further ado, I present to you the drawn storyline of Margulis and Balls. It all begins with a war being fought, now referred to as the Old War. During the Old War times, there was an Orokin ship called the Zariman 10-0, and it was waiting to void jump to the Tau system. What the hell is the Tau system? Don't know. On the ship, there were crewmates and there were children. And at one particular point in time, a fight broke out between two of those kids, and you can see the kids on the ship here looking real mad. A short time later, the ship experienced a void jump accident. Presumably, it was attempting to exit the storyline by going to Tau, never to be seen again, and instead, it got lost somehow. There was this catastrophe. It took years for the ship to be recovered, the crew died, but the children survived, and they gained powers, as you can see them using here. These goo-goo gaga little children suddenly have the ability to Hadouken at will. This was very scary for the Orokin, who found them and took them back in, and some attempts were made to fix the children, but these attempts were unsuccessful, so they just stayed goo-goo gaga Hadouken the entire time. Now, an interesting observation here is that this is probably where the name Tenno comes from, because the children were aboard the Zariman 10-0, and you can write 10-0 as 10-0. Tenno. Get it? Cool. All right. Attempts were made to fix the children, like I said. One person that was really trying her best to do the right thing here was this lovely lady called Margulis, represented by this M-shaped hairline that she has. And she loved the children, and she put them into a dream by using these pods that you can see here, designed like a lotus flower. And she sang to them while they dreamed. Now, my theory is that the music in the second dream, which is like, oh, that could be Margulis singing to you. That would be really cute if that was the case. Don't know, it's just a theory. Anyway, inside the dreams, the children who have these powerful blue hands could control their powers. Whoa. But the children blinded Margulis. Yeah, not ideal. What probably happened is the kids were not all going to bed on time, as children tend to do in reality, and one of them probably lashed out at some point or something like that and made Margulis sick and blinded her. But still, she persisted. There's this other character called Balls who steps into the picture here, and Balls tries to convince Margulis that the children should be destroyed. He says they're devils, get rid of them. Balls also said that for her apostasy, for her crimes, her treason in trying to help these devilish children, Margulis should renounce before the seven. Who are the seven? Beats me. Dunno. We'll get to that later, though I do have a theory. But Balls is certainly fighting in their favor, and so Balls might be part of the seven, or Balls might just be sucking up to the 7, like licking the boots of the 7. It's one of the two. For this, the Orokin execute Margulis. So clearly, the 7 make a decision, and that's the end of her, which is really unfortunate. So our wonderful M-shaped heroine here meets an early demise. And the Orokin, represented in wonderful artistic fashion by a stick figure with an O on their head, point and laugh. So, the children are left behind. Margulis is gone now. What's going to happen? Are they just going to sit in the pods forever? Well, those children, those rejects, are consigned to Lua. That's the moon, which you can see them all standing on just here. And presumably this is why the Tenno Reservoir later on, right, when we're talking about protecting it and stuff in the Second Dream, presumably that's why it's on Lua, right? It's because that's where all the kids are consigned to. Now, the Orokin use the work of Margulis, who is now dead, obviously, to create this thing called transference, which allows a mind to project into a surrogate strong enough to control its operator's power, which sounds awfully like a Warframe, depicted by this wonderful W-shaped fellow over here. Balls, interestingly, is hesitant to make use of the children in their frame forms, and says to this executor character, we might want to be a little bit careful of this. Like, they're not just Dax soldiers, like these are kind of some scary individuals, but clearly they push forward because there is a bigger threat facing the Orokin at this time, which we will get back to. So, the children, in their frame form as the Tenno, embrace their new way of life, and they try to live with honor, right? They serve the Orokin, but they are now beyond the Orokin, so to speak. And they found these schools called the Tenno Ways to guide their futures. So what looked like a terrifying paragraph of text wasn't actually that bad, was it? Pretty understandable, I hope you would agree. Let's get to theory time. That was the story of Balls and Margulis, but I think Margulis has an alter ego. And I've discovered something here, which I think is just too good to be a coincidence. Isn't this suspicious? Margulis was trying to be convinced to vote to destroy the children by Balls. Lotus equally was supposed to complete the sequence, according to Treeman, to destroy the Tenno. The children are the Tenno. So this destroying of the children and destroying of the Tenno seems awfully similar. Let's go to point 2. Margulis couldn't bring herself to do it because she loved the children. Lotus couldn't bring herself to do it because she wanted children of her own, as Treeman tells us. Point 3. She put the children into a dream. What did Lotus do? Well, she hid the Tenno in a second dream. Point 4. Margulis's position was seen by the 7 as apostasy, right? Also known as betrayal. Who else has had her position seen as betrayal? Lotus. Treeman feels betrayed by Lotus. Isn't this all a little bit convenient? I hear you cry. I think that perhaps Lotus is Margulis. I know it would be a bit crazy, but I think it's possible. Hear me out here. Lots of ideas are going to tumble out of my mouth in the next 30 seconds. Could Lotus be the Tenno form of Margulis? That would make Margulis the operator. That would mean that Margulis could have tested her own transference technology on herself, and the form she would have taken up would have been the Lotus. But then if Margulis, being an operator, died, how is Lotus active if that's the case? It's almost like her Tenno form, which is now still active post the death of Margulis, has become sentient. Her frame, which previously was just a frame, a skeleton, right, nuts and bolts, suddenly it's a sentient box of nuts and bolts. And after all, Lotus is a sentient, just like Treeman is. Would that mean, though, that Treeman is also a frame without an operator? Because Treeman is a sentient too. So if this is how you reach sentience, right, in the specific form being used here, then would that mean that there is an operator of Treeman out there somewhere? Or maybe that there was, and that operator has been lost? I mean, we don't know what happens if an operator dies. We haven't seen that. What does it do to the frame that they're controlling? If an operator is imagining something and the imagined thing is a real tangible form, and then the imaginer dies, there's still a form. So then what? That's the question, right? Could it mean the sequence of Lotus having to destroy the Tenno, was she actually having to put a stop to their own lineage? Was she trying to cease the creation of future sentience? Because if there are no Tenno remaining, then maybe there are no forms for the operators to control. Perhaps the risk becomes the fact that if an operator is controlling a frame and then they die, you end up with this endless proliferation of sentience, right? But maybe that causes problems bringing that sort of power into the universe. Maybe that is what the sequence is for, is to prevent those problems from happening in the first place. Maybe this is why Treeman had to be destroyed in order for the sequence to be completed. We know that that is the case. Treeman was destroyed. Treeman is full of embers and char in that little picture of him that we get. Is this why he was destroyed? It's an interesting one to think about. It really is. Let's keep going. We're going to come back to some of these thoughts in a moment, okay? Natah, Hunhao says, Treeman says, "You trust this Orokin blood who would chisel weapons from our bones?" That's a quote, right? Direct from the man himself. And it's interesting because it says, "You trust this Orokin blood," seemingly referring to us, right? Us, the Tenno. And this makes me think that the Lotus maybe isn't Orokin blood herself, because Treeman is creating a divide here, saying, look, this Tenno is Orokin blood, and we don't like Orokin blood, right? Why? Well, if Margulis is Lotus, Margulis wouldn't like Orokin because the Orokin killed Margulis. So of course, a distinction will be drawn here, and Treeman would try to leverage that fact. Now, it does make me wonder, what weapons are chiseled from sentient bones? Like, what's the second half of this statement? I don't know. That one's a mystery for me right now. But certainly, this, I think, is an interesting additional detail. There's also a chance, I guess, that Lotus is just Margulis' #1 fan. And so she saw what Margulis did for the operators, and she was like, you know what? I'm having that. I'll do the same for the Tenno, and it'll be nice and poetic. You know, maybe Lotus is just a clout chaser. Let's keep moving. There's much to consider here. I am not yet finished. I'm not even yet halfway through. Let's talk now about the Treeman-Lotus relationship. It's pretty confusing. There's a lot of elements that we need to glue together. So there's all these quotes, and we can learn from each of them little scraps of information, and slowly but surely you build up a picture. So I'm going to highlight a couple of sentences here. "My own daughter," Treeman says about Lotus, "the last of my womb." But then equally, Treeman says, "You'll be reclaimed by your own father." That being him, Treeman. So it seems like it doesn't matter that Treeman is the father of Lotus. In this world, the father has a womb. And there is no questioning of that in the game here. It's just taken at face value. Daddy birthed daughter Natah. For some reason. There's also this very strange element, right? Where we get this quote, "Lotus, join with me, destroy your shame, become the one I love, become Natah once more." That's from Treeman. Now, if we dive into some of the missions in the game, we can get a little bit more elaboration as to the relationship as it pertains to that comment. So there's this mission where you have to find the sentient fragments, right? That's fragments of Treeman, Hunhao. You see all these interesting relics through the mission, and I'm sure this big bone thing is going to be very relevant at some stage in the game. But the fragment in question really is this one on the right-hand side here. And in the mission, we get recognition from Lotus that yes, this is a fragment of my father. She says my father, not my mother, despite the fact that she came from her father's womb. Her father was destroyed in the old war, and she says, I can use it to see him. Then the Tenno touches the fragment, and we get this comment, I see the stalker, stronger, Hunhao's voice within him. I see the reservoir, but I feel confusion. He doesn't know, unless... Oh no. And then Hunhao says, thank you, daughter. Fears baited you to the snare. What was secret is now known. Dumbass. Your Tenno, their touch. I now see the womb of the sky. So basically, you as the Tenno touching this fragment causes Treeman to be able to basically see into your head. Okay? I found that quite interesting. Similarly, earlier on in this Infiltrate the Grineer Archives mission, we get these comments saying that the sentient Hunhao has been able to invade Lotus's thoughts, right? We get this other comment, every part of him is connected to his singular mind. And even in that mission, Hunhao, or Treeman, through the sword fragment that's being wielded by REDMAN, says, I see your mind. I've already found them. You owe me their lives. Like, bro, you're dumb. Now, all of this in totality together builds this picture for me that maybe Lotus is a fragment of Treeman. We talk about womb here, and we think distinct child, right? But Lotus is called Lotus for a reason, and I kind of wonder if these pieces of dialogue in the Grineer Archives mission are telling us something a bit more multifaceted than initially meets the eye. We learn fragments of Hunhao's body are everywhere. We learn that he has a connection to those fragments. But we also learn at the beginning of the mission that Treeman's thoughts have invaded Lotus's, right? Well, if Treeman has connection to all his fragments, it's no wonder that he would have connection to Lotus if Lotus is one of his fragments. It also dovetails with this quote from Natah, where Treeman says something along the lines of, the seed falls far from the branch, or something like that, talking about Natah. And I think that this is almost an implication of this botanical nature that they have. It's almost like Lotus is a clipping of Treeman. You can liken this maybe to Eve being taken from Adam's rib. It's got that sort of spirit to it, but there is definitely a tree focus here as opposed to a clay focus, where I feel like one of the riven fragments of Treeman could well be the Lotus. And that may be why there's even this talk of being riven, right? Being split into fragments, into parts, where Treeman says, Lotus, you're going to risk being called riven and reclaimed or something. It's, again, all backing up this idea that Lotus may actually be a fragment of some kind. So child, yes, but clipping, perhaps also. What's the deal with REDMAN? What the hell's going on there? This is going to take some time. We, similarly to what we had for Treeman and Lotus, have a bunch of REDMAN facts. We've got quotes saying, who do you hunt, Shadow, to cleanse your despair? Who destroyed the Orokin, your way of life? The quote about the heart of gold. The secret is dangerous and it drove the stalker to madness. How do we combine all of these things together? Let's focus on these two quotes to begin with. My magnum opus, if you will. REDMAN was driven to madness. Was he? Let's explore that. We have this quote, which is the source of this statement. Note, the source of the statement is Lotus. And Lotus has lied to us time and time again. She lied to us about the operator existing. She lied to us about, she fled, actually. As soon as we started seeing mermaids, she upped and left. She got the hell out of there. She was like, Tenno, you're on your own, lol. I'm scramming. So Lotus isn't necessarily entirely reliable. But Lotus says, within the moon lies the reservoir, the secret to your Tenno power, but this secret is dangerous. It drove the stalker to madness. Forgive my deception. So she admits the fact that she's a bit of a trickster. I was only trying to protect you from the same fate. So Lotus was trying to stop you from thinking the same way REDMAN thinks. Keep that in your mind. So, we get that first cutscene where the operator pops out of the pod, right? That's this one here. This is the same cutscene that we're talking about, just for visual reference. And the operator falls to the floor, and then the operator touches the Tenno, and they kind of have a little moment together. And then REDMAN threatens the Tenno, but steps back and doesn't take the Tenno down, doesn't attack the operator, just sort of leaves them to it. Treeman says you hesitate, but remember your despair, right? Remember your despair. But we get this weird moment towards the end of the cutscene where the operator raises their hand, and I immediately noticed that REDMAN also raised his hand in the exact same way. These things don't happen coincidentally. This is very intentional cinematography. The fact that the player character, the Tenno, is supporting the operator in this moment, and you see this hand raised and the hand raised on the other side. It's trying to tell us something about how they are kin, right? How they are somehow connected. Connected how exactly? Well, we've got this next cutscene, right, where you have a whole load of really interesting stuff, actually, and I've got screenshots from my notes here just to sort of make it easier to show the beats of the cutscene. That's these orange moments here. You charge the somatic link, the Tenno and operator get knocked back, the Tenno gets stabbed, then the Tenno starts breaking the sword, just like I described to you before. But if we look at some of the notes that I took here, we get this very interesting Treeman quote. No self, no sense, no death, just a metal puppet dangling on Tenno's strings. Only the Tenno's death will end your despair. This could be read as being said initially to the Tenno themselves, right? But the Tenno's just one possible party. It could also be being said directly to REDMAN. Treeman could be saying, you're just a metal puppet dangling on Tenno's strings, giving the implication that maybe REDMAN is a Tenno. It's possible REDMAN has been a frame this entire time and is being controlled essentially by an operator of some kind. That then poses the question, was REDMAN a Tenno the whole time? Or was REDMAN previously an operator? Or like, what is going on there, right? Does REDMAN have an operator? Is REDMAN sentient? Well, you then start to think, okay, well, given the understanding that we've had from everything else so far, it's unlikely that REDMAN is sentient, because if REDMAN was sentient, REDMAN wouldn't be able to go to the Void, because the Void is poisonous to sentience, and that's why Treeman can't go there. So if Treeman can't go, and Treeman is sentient, and REDMAN can go, and REDMAN is sentient, that wouldn't make sense. So it's unlikely, I think, that REDMAN is sentient. There's probably an operator in the picture somewhere. Or is REDMAN the operator? Is that an option? Let's explore this a little bit. We've got all these different quotes. Was REDMAN previously a Tenno and then broke out of the Tenno ways and has gone elsewhere? Or, like I said, was REDMAN previously an operator that defected in some capacity too? There's also this quote that I want to bring you back to, right? All your dreadlong life, you've waited for this moment. But you're asking yourself, was I one of these wretched things? You still hate them. You still hate yourself. Why would REDMAN hate the Tenno? Did he, like I said, leave the Tenno ways? Did he defect? Is he a Tenno without an operator? I think it's unlikely. The hand raise in the cutscene makes me think that he is being operated at that point. But it's weird because it's our operator that's raising their hand. And so I almost wonder if what's happening is that he isn't being operated in perpetuity by us, right? But actually, it's just showing that operators can control frames. And for a brief moment there, when Treeman is saying, bro, why aren't you killing the Tenno, you donkey? Like, they're right there. You could just be ending it all now. This is your only opportunity, mate, in that cutscene. The operator might actually be sort of fighting for control of REDMAN and being like, lol, raise your hand up, recognize the fact that I do have some control over you. Maybe that's what's happening there. Maybe REDMAN is a frame. That then poses the question, what's the shame of all this? Because we had all these quotes, right? Your despair, your shame, it comes back time and time again from Treeman, right? We have this quote right here. Who destroyed the Orokin, your way of life? Who do you hunt, Shadow, to cleanse your despair? We then have this Alad quote. Genocidal invaders from the other system make strange bedfellows. That's weird, right? And that might seem out of place in my preparation of these slides here, but it's going to be really relevant, right? Genocidal invaders from the other system? Does that mean that the Tenno are genocidal? That's weird. Okay, well, what about Treeman, right? How does Treeman fit into this picture? Treeman is described as Nightmare of the Orokin. Huh, okay. Genocidal Tenno, Nightmare of the Orokin. And then Alad says, hurry Tenno, be careful. Last time you got close with the sentients, you wiped out a civilization. But you don't remember that, do you? So that starts getting other questions swirling in my mind. Did the Tenno work with the sentients, as proposed by this third bullet here, to cause a genocide? And then they forgot. Is that how that came to be? Were REDMAN's people maybe wiped out in that genocide? Is that possible? Could REDMAN think that only the Tenno were responsible and then forgot that the sentient was involved, right? If the Tenno can't remember that they wiped out an entire civilization with the sentients, right? Would it follow that REDMAN wouldn't remember the involvement of the sentients as well and would only remember maybe the Tenno aspect of things? Possibly, right? Could that mean that Treeman could be using REDMAN's amnesia to get him to chase down and attack the Tenno? Because we know at the end of the day that Treeman wants this sequence finished of all the Tenno wiped out. Treeman wants that to happen. And the next question that I wonder about, was it the Orokin who were wiped out? Because in this blue quote here, who destroyed the Orokin? Why has that been mentioned if they weren't the ones wiped out? I think it's likely there was a genocide on the Orokin people and the Tenno were involved. We get this quote here that says, all missions to the Origin system required a sacrifice. Could it have been that their sacrifice was killing the Orokin? Did they need life force from a people in order to be able to make that jump? Is there potential for that? That's a quote from the end of Natah. Is there a different sacrifice entirely? Is it the fact that their kind become barren when crossing the gap? Is the sacrifice in that direction? Is it a womb sacrifice? Or is it this genocide in question here? If it was the Orokin that were wiped out, why is it that the Orokin are now present in this system? After all, Alad is Orokin, according to Treeman. Treeman says that. Now, my suspicion is that it's not just Alad who's Orokin, but further to that, REDMAN is also Orokin. And I think that what's being stated here by Treeman is that Alad is essentially a descendant from these peoples, perhaps, right? And REDMAN also is Orokin. Now, why do I think that? Well, let's get there. We know that Treeman has been using REDMAN for his own means. We know that REDMAN is very sad about something. We know that the Orokin people were wiped out. We know that there's shame involved. Is the shame of REDMAN that he played a part in the Tenno genocide of the Orokin people, perhaps of his own people? That would be pretty messed up, right? If you were a frame and you were used as a weapon of war to wipe out your own kind. That's pretty horrid. So could it be that REDMAN is an ex-Tenno who left the Tenno ways because he did participate in the old war in taking out all of the Orokin people, and now he wants to avenge their loss, right? It's possible. It's possible. You can at least tell me it's possible. But all of this starts to hinge on some foundational details. We need strong evidence REDMAN is Orokin. And we've got corroboration about the idea here, right? Because Lotus, in that statement that I called out to you before, said, this secret is dangerous, it drove the stalker to madness. The secret being that the Tenno reservoir is in the moon, right? And so finding out for REDMAN that he was a frame might have made REDMAN then discover that he was being controlled, and therefore he might have wanted to reject that control because he might have recognized that that control was being used for the wrong means. That's why I wanted to highlight this idea that Lotus might call that madness. Lotus might think, yeah, if you defect from the 10 ways, that's madness. But actually, maybe it's just common sense that you recognize these 10 ways are not as noble as we're saying they are because they're being used to implement a genocide. So of course, Lotus is a 10 genocide apologist, and she's calling REDMAN mad for thinking that actually this is unjust. But like I said, we need strong evidence that REDMAN is Orokin in order for this to really make sense. And this is where I have cooked a 3-course meal, and it's either going to be such a great insight that I will be very proud of, or it's going to be so wrong that you are all going to find it very funny. I have a crazy theory. Do you remember this? From the start of the video, we called out that REDMAN, seemingly, has a heart of gold. Now, you could interpret that as, well, he has a heart of gold because in his heart, he's actually doing the right thing, and he's resisting the supplication of the sentience by the Tenno in genociding the Orokin. The heart of gold could be that he's actually doing something morally positive instead of following the twisted, horrible Tenno ways. That could be his heart of gold. And I think it's probably a dual meaning. But it could also mean something else, because I am looking for evidence that REDMAN is Orokin. Let's think about gold. Gold, gold, gold. A heart of gold. A heart of gold. Well, we've had dozens of mention of the Tenno heart. Interesting that a heart of gold might be mentioned here, but gold. What could it be that is related to REDMAN being Orokin? I'd like to present you with an idea I had. If you translate the word gold into one of the most spoken languages on this planet, Spanish, amongst other languages, what is it in Spanish? It's oro. O-R-O. That's interesting, isn't it? Suddenly, the word Orokin doesn't look like Orokin anymore. It looks like Oro-kin. Gold kin. And who has a heart of gold, chat? This guy does. He's got a heart of gold. He's got Oro inside him, pumping his blood. So he is Oro-kin. Literally. It is a direct usage of the word. We needed strong evidence that REDMAN's Orokin. I think we found it. That is all the evidence I need, and that's why in every slide that I've had REDMAN present, he's had a little heart of gold on here to illustrate this, because if the Warframe writers could go to the lengths to put that in there, I could go to the lengths to illustrate it for you on my slides. It's cinema. So that means, take a deep breath here, okay? Take a deep breath. That means Lotus might be Margulis. REDMAN might be an Orokin who's mad about the Tenno wiping out many Orokin in cahoots with the sentience. Lotus might be a tree clipping of Treeman. A lad is the greatest character in the game so far. Lotus might be describing REDMAN's perspective as madness because Lotus herself is a sentient who was one of the perpetrators of that genocide, which REDMAN resists. So of course she shuns him and makes him seem crazy. She basically gaslights him. The Tenno are named after the children of the Zariman 10-0. They operate the Tenno through their dream to control their powers. That is the first thing that you learn in the second dream, really, before you start digging under the surface. The sentient, like I said, wants Lotus to end the Tenno, but Lotus wants children of her own, and we will now have to fight a war on two fronts. The war within and the war without. Which means the next things that are presumably coming are we're going to understand where REDMAN went at the end of that cutscene when the branch, the sword was broken, right? And what the threat was to the Orokin originally in that previous place, galaxy, system, universe, whatever. What was the threat that they were facing? Was it the threat of the Tenno and the sentience, as I have suspected here? That is my current proposition. But there are many more mysteries that we haven't gotten into today. One of them actually is directly relevant right here, and that's where did REDMAN go at the end of that cutscene? Well, if REDMAN is indeed a Tenno, essentially, we know that the Tenno respawn. And that's the first thing you see at the beginning of Second Dream, is you see a downed Tenno, and we hear, cut the head off one, and another spawns in its place, right? We hear that, and you need to take out the heart in order to get rid of it. So could it be that when the sword is broken, actually, that's just like killing a Tenno, because REDMAN is sort of killed in a sense, but actually just respawns and is fine. REDMAN is just going to keep on going. I think that that's the way that's going to go. I think that, tragically, REDMAN destroying the Tenno heart would actually destroy REDMAN. It's just that that's a fate that REDMAN would be happy with, because the shame REDMAN feels requires that to be cleansed. And the only way it can be cleansed is if the Tenno are killed, and therefore if REDMAN himself is also killed. Could it even be, and I'll just give you a little add-on here before I get to some of my other questions that I want to go into, could it even be that Hunhao or Treeman is operating REDMAN? That's something we'll come back to, okay? We have loads of mentions through Second Dream of Treeman saying, the moon will be crushed by the weight of the void, blah, 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 blah. But then he says the sky will be as it should be. This happens tons. There are loads of mentions of the sky returning to its proper place. I find the repeated mention of this very weird. I don't know what it means right now. I obviously know that the moon not being in its normal place and instead being in the void is part of it. It's a literal meaning for it. But I can't help but feel like there's more. And I wonder if some element of Natah hiding it there has broader consequences or implications that we're going to learn in the very near future. Also, who decides that the moon is off limits to the sentients? I get that they say the void is poison to the sentients, but why? I mean, Lotus at one point is described as being omnipotent. That is all-powerful. So why can't she just go for a walk in the void? That seems weird. Could it be the void, which is where the children got their powers from? Could it be that somehow corrupts frames and only the children can survive there, and that's why the adults also die when there's the void accident or something? I'm reaching here. But then could it be therefore, if Lotus is a sentient frame that no longer has an operator, she can't go back there, and it's because of that void accident in the first place that kind of set the rules? I don't know. Next one I don't know about is this. I found this reward room underneath the pendula, and in the reward room there are 7 doors. Then later in the mission, I found these 7 crests or 7 seals, 7 icons, right? 7 logos. And we also have this mention of there being 7 hands raised, which is behind my camera, but we have this mention of it by Balls. Could these be the 7 who Margulis is asked to renounce in front of? Could these be the logos and slogans or names of the 7? I think that it's likely, but I have no other supporting evidence right now. And do the 7 have special doors into the reward room? Again, I don't know. Also, why can I make bridges by this tree? Because this tree seems really sus, right? This tree is in a central area of the mission, and you can stand on these platforms and create these weird bridges, and it's super sus, and I have no explanation for it right now. Similarly, I want to ask you guys about Warframe, because I've got a little bit of a theory that there might be some Warframe stuff happening here. I keep spotting this symbol, and this symbol looks quite womby, and we've got these mentions of wombs from Treeman saying that Lotus came from his womb, And we have the idea of becoming barren when you cross the gap and all these sorts of things. Is this symbol that I found a womb? I think it's possible. And it then makes me wonder, because sometimes the womb is inverted. It's displayed like this. And it makes me wonder if the womb here is a point of ingress or egress from the dream. And so this symbol depicted this way is sort of showing that you can maybe exit the dream at this place or point, maybe? Or it represents whether you're going in or out of the dream or something. It's just interesting to me that it's inverted in lots of different places. And those places seem very specific and intentional. Also, there's these weird devices. In one area, this thing doesn't have any symbols on it. In another area, it's got these weird bees, these little sort of golden snitch symbols, and they're lit up on it. In another spot, there's a device that has a bee on it, but it's not lit. What does that mean? But clearly some environmental design love has been poured into this, and therefore I think that it probably does contain some kind of mysteries. Another one to question is, what if a Tenno frame got into one of these pods? Like, think about it. An operator in the sort of first dream, if you will, or rather in reality, maybe, the real world, base existence, could go into a pod as a child, one of the children, and control a frame. But then what if a frame gets in a pod? Do they go back to the original dream reality? Or do they go to a nested further dream? Is this why Second Dream isn't First Dream? Because then it's sort of a hierarchy of operator has the first dream, and that gets them into the frame, and then the frame are hid in a second dream by Lotus. Is that why it's called Second Dream? I'm not 100% sure. I also need answers about this. What the hell, man? I can't stress how cool I think this is. The fact that I was playing the mission and I walk into this quite cathedral-like space, a face appears, says nothing, does nothing, just appears, and then disappears 10 seconds later. And I'm left to just be like, what the ever-loving heck is going on here? It's a sign of the depth of this game, and it's a sign of how intricate the devs have been in their approach to little flashes of lore appearing at very specific curated moments. But I don't know what the deal is with the face. My guess is it could be a face of one of the seven. It could be a face of Bowls or Margulis. It could be related to that in some way. There's all these blue men on Lua. Is this a sort of similar thing where, just like we've got the Hat Man, who sort of looks down over Fortuna, and just like we've got the Glove Man, who's sort of doing some stuff on, is it Jupiter? I can't remember right now. Maybe there's the Blue Head Man looking down over the Blue Men on Lua. If you want the answers to all of this, there's only really one path that you should be following right now, and it's hitting the subscribe button. You got to do that. I've got a playlist in the description, which has links to all of my Warframe theories, all of my playthrough videos, which are separated into one playlist, which is the entire VODs, and another playlist, which is just the edited highlights if you have less time. But really, you got to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss this stuff. And tune into my streams as well, man. Twitch.tv/MrRoflWaffles is the place to be. I'm only going to keep putting all of this effort into all this stuff if you guys actually keep turning up as you have done so far. So, like, I hope to see you in the streams, and thanks for watching my grand theory of what the hell is going on in the Second Dream.